Okay, let me just say it might be a better idea to buy this book or to get it from the library rather than watch this video because, as you can see, it's gonna be a long one. I have a lot of things I want to read. This will be like the last book I read excerpts from. It's just gonna be things that I think are thought-provoking. So let's begin. Nothing tortures the human spirit more effectively than making someone a prisoner of her own fears. That's a good point. And this is a story that is at the beginning of the book that she refers back to several times. There once was a strong and inquisitive young man who loved to travel. In his thirst for knowledge, he moved from place to place and traveled from town to town, drinking in the wisdom and recording everything that happened to him. Eventually, he came to a beautiful village, slumbering at the foot of a mountain surrounded on all sides by green hills, where gentle winds blew intermittently, delighting the mind and refreshing the heart. In this beautiful place, he was shocked to see that the inhabitants of the village were sad. They moved sluggishly, dragging their feet. To him they appeared no more than moving phantoms without body or soul. The sight of those phantoms terrified him. He became determined to discover what made them so, and set off to see a fabled wise man, who lived alone in a hut cut off from the village and its inhabitants. When he met the wise man, he asked what secret lay behind this great paradox. He asked why these people lived in a state of subjugation and dejection in a village where everything would seem to suggest that the people would be blessed with happiness and well-being. The sage came out of his hut and pointed towards the top of the mountain. Look at that peak. An enormous ogre sits up there. From where he sits, he raves and shrieks, filling people's hearts with fear by threatening to gobble them all up if they leave their homes or do any kind of work at all. The people, terrorized by his shrieks, can live only by stealth. Only their survival instinct keeps them going. They steal out like mice in secret to gather enough to keep body and soul together. They live day by day, waiting impatiently for the moment of their death. Their fear of this ogre has sapped their intellect and depleted their physical powers, reducing them to despair and hopelessness. The young man thought for a while and said, I'm going to the top of the mountain. I will talk to this ogre and ask what makes him threaten and frighten these people. I will ask him why he wants to prevent them from leading their lives in peace and safety. Go to the top of the mountain? No insane person would risk his life by daring to meet the ogre. I implore you not to do it for the sake of your life, young man. But the young man would not be dissuaded. He was determined to do what he believed had to be done. And so, with slow but sure steps, he started on his way to the peak. When the young man reached the peak, the ogre did, indeed, seem large at first. However, when he found as he walked on, astonished him. The closer he got, the smaller the ogre became. By the time he arrived, he found that the great ogre who terrorized many was smaller than his littlest finger. The young man flattened his hand, held out his pawn, and the tiny ogre jumped onto it. Who are you? The young man asked. I am Fear, the ogre replied. Fear of what? The young man asked. That depends on who you are. How each person sees me depends on how he imagines me. Sometimes people fear illness, and they see me as disease. Others fear poverty, so they see me as poverty. Others fear authority, so they see authority in me. Some fear injustice, other wild beasts or storms, so that's how I appear to them. He who fears water sees me as a torrent. He who fears war perceives in me an army, ammunition, and such like. But why do they see you as bigger than you really are? To each person, I appear as big as his fear. And as long as they refuse to approach and confront me, they'll never know my true size. This next bit is her thoughts on why a person, when confronted with an argument, will start just shrieking and yelling instead of talking it out. When a person adopts a particular style of behavior, he observes the degree to which other people accept it. If they encourage him, or at least make no objection, he will continue. The way the world has retreated and continues to retreat in the face of Muslim screams and shouts has played a major role in encouraging them to behave the way they do. When others remain silent or worse, retreat, Muslims get the impression that they are right. Even before I read this book, I had compared the reaction of Muslims towards things they don't like the drawing of Muhammad or the burning of Qurans, to a child throwing a tantrum. If they don't get their way, they're going to be angry and yell and stamp their little feet. There's a lot of personal stories in this book, and this is an incident that happened to her as a child, an incident with her brothers. I can remember numerous occasions when, for one reason or another, I had a run-in with one of my brothers, who would then rain down blows upon me. My shrieks, like those of a Bedouin, were usually my only means of defense, as my high-pitched voice was much more powerful than my small body. My grandmother would quickly stick her fingers in her ears to shut out the noise, saying, "May God quiet her voice. Goes right through you, you shameless girl. So your brother gave you a slap in the face. What's the problem? He's just disciplining you. Has the Kaaba collapsed?" That's the thing in Mecca that they all prayed towards. Has the Kaaba collapsed? That question still echoes in my head. Time after time, though I worshipped her, I wanted to shout in my grandmother's face, "Shut up, you stupid woman. You may have let my grandfather beat you, but I'm not going to let anyone hit me. A man hitting me is much more serious than the collapse of the Kaaba." The next bit, she was going to college to get a medical degree, and she was staying with another Muslim family there. So this is about the wife. Her name was Huda. When she was 16 years old, a woman came knocking on her family's door looking for a girl of marriageable age. As soon as the woman laid eyes on Huda, she was struck by her beauty and immediately asked her mother for her hand in marriage as bride of her son. After meeting the man's family, Huda's father seized the opportunity to marry his daughter off to this wealthy man, even though the prospective groom was 14 years older than she was. It was not until the wedding night that she saw the bridegroom for the first time. When he came into her room, she began to shudder. The wedding guests were all waiting outside the door for proof of her virginity. The bridegroom fell upon her like an animal and emerged from the room a few minutes later bearing a piece of cloth stained with her blood. The female members of the family shouted for joy and danced. She confessed to me more than once that she did not love her husband, and she was, in fact, very much afraid of him. It's pretty much a typical marriage situation in Syria and other Arab countries. The bride-to-be has never met her husband, and he's usually a lot older, and she has no say at all in choosing her husband. In her 4th year in college, she worked at a clinic, a gynecological clinic, for a few hours a week, and this is about that. In his clinic, I came face to face with all those things that had been hidden behind the closed doors and windows of my neighborhood. My work at his clinic was confined, in most cases, to diagnosing pregnancies and confirming the virgin status of young girls. It was the doctor's task to abort the children of the girls who were pregnant and patch up those who had lost their virginity. The patients and their escorts entered the office concealed under their cloaks so that only their hands showed. None wished to risk being recognized. In the examination room, where the woman and her daughter or granddaughter talked to the doctor, the story was always the same. "Doctor, my daughter had a serious fall and bled when she was a child, and we're here to make sure she's still a virgin because she's about to get married." When the doctor explained, after examining the young girl, that she hadn't just lost her virginity but was also pregnant, the two women would weep and beg the doctor to help solve their problems. In most cases, after numbers of questions, the young woman would confess that after many years, since childhood, she had been sexually abused by her father, her brother, an uncle, or another male relative. Frequently, the girl had only just begun to menstruate and become pregnant not long after her first period. One would think that a doctor's attitude to young women in distress such as this would have been one of care and sympathy. No relationship between a man and woman in that sick society could be anything but oppressive and exploitative. Not even the relationship between a male doctor and his female patients. The doctor frequently took advantage of the sensitivity of the situation and demanded fantastic sums as payment. The next bit, to give some background, she would have to go by bus to go into town from university to get things for school. This journey, which took about an hour by bus, was a cruel one. The bus route passed through many neighborhoods, and only 10 minutes after leaving the campus, the vehicle would already be packed with passengers crammed in like sardines. Most of the women on the bus, who never made up more than a quarter of the total number of passengers, were students, and their movements resembled those of mice attempting to flee from a malicious cat. No sooner did a man get the opportunity to press up against a woman that his penis would poke into her back like an iron bar. Street complaints could be heard, but the sad fact of the matter was that the residents of the town regarded the female students as prostitutes, plain and simple. Women in Islamic countries are called prostitutes if they're doing anything outside of their home, if they're not married, if they're going out on the streets by themselves. It's a common insult. Once out of the bus and onto the street, it was not much better. The contempt displayed towards us was nonstop. It was nerve-wracking and exhausting to be in any public place any day of the week if you were a woman. Friday, though, was the most difficult day, and we avoided going out in public at all. The buses and streets were full of men on the way to mosque. Many of them, who had the good fortune to be able to press up against the young woman, even if only for a few moments, had enough time to ejaculate in his pants, so that he could arrive at the mosque and stand before his God in a more gratified frame of mind. Together with Ahmed and his family, I attended a number of weddings in the town. Rather than being happy affairs, they provided me with an opportunity to explore more deeply this society, which appeared to be sick to the very marrow of its bones. At weddings, people would split up into two groups, with the women in one room and the men in the other. Each group celebrated in its own way. Women wore the most striking clothes and remarkable finery to these weddings. Their clothing, however, was not the only thing that was shocking. Normally staid, the women became voracious. I have never seen anything like it in my life. Women would go up to one another and touch each other, such as pinching a bottom or a breast or putting a hand between thighs. None of them appeared surprised by this behavior, nor did anyone protest against it. Towards the end of the wedding celebration, an announcement would be made that the bridegroom was on his way to the women's hall to collect his bride. As soon as they heard this, the women would quickly pick up their wraps and would transform themselves within minutes into objects of resembling rubbish bins arranged along the highway, each indistinguishable from the next, trained by a sick society to cover a body that we were told would lead men astray. So judging from that, it was one of the few opportunities women would have to be able to express themselves in different way, by clothes, by dressing up in bright colors and wearing lots of jewelry, and also perhaps sexually, because she mentioned they would touch each other. And I've read in another book written by a woman that lived in Saudi Arabia for a year, she would go to get-togethers where the women would all be dancing quite sexually with each other. It's pretty much their only opportunity to express themselves sexually and fashionably.